It's the Chris Michaels Show. In a very rare instance, I am live. The official program observer, Chi Chi, the blue parakeet, is going bananas. She's in the background chiming in, and she will just remain with us throughout the show. And that's okay because Cheech always has things to talk about. Trump is doing a lot to make sure that we have oil, or at least America is selling oil and strangling China's energy dependence elsewhere. But before we get into that, Miss Katy Perry, of all people, Miss Katy Perry, she has a new beau, and that is Mr. Trudeau. Trudeau, yes, he was the former head of Canuckistan and Canada. And in this whole time, we find out that Mr. Trudeau, guess what? He was found in a photograph with Miss Katy Perry. What were they doing in it? Miss Katy Perry and Mr. Trudeau, they were drinking from a red solo plastic cup. And why is this such a big deal? It's because under Trudeau in Canuckistan, they outlawed plastic cups. So, just imagine the utter hypocrisy that Mr. Trudeau is engaging in by drinking out of and imbibing in spirits from a plastic red solo cup. But, my friends, it doesn't end there. The travesty of Katy Perry goes even further because we find out that Miss Katy Perry is also involved with shaking down old people and getting as much of their estate as possible. Yes, you can go and look back all throughout Hollywood when she lived over in California and all of the lawsuits that she would engage in and essentially try to steal real estate and from people that are dying or in hospice. It's a very, very bizarre lifestyle that Miss Perry has, but none other than Ruby Rose. Yes, actress. I would assume she is non binary. From Orange is the New Black. And I also believe she played Batgirl or Batwoman. She's always out there with this tomboyish like hairstyle. She has come out alleging that Miss Katy Perry has sexually assaulted her. Yes. What did Miss Perry do to Miss Rose? Apparently, Miss Rose and Miss Perry was at the Spice Market nightclub in Melbourne, Australia, about 2 decades ago. And for some reason, Miss Ruby Rose was either prostrate or she was sitting up, chatting normally like you and I do. And for some reason, Katy Perry decides to unfurl her vaginal lips and give her Miss Perry gave Miss Rose a massive raspberry. Yes, it was the queef of Hades. Miss Rose says that Perry pulled her underwear aside and rubbed her vagina on Rose's face, and subsequently, Miss Rose decided to upchuck her dinner and alcohol. Yes, Miss Rose vomited all over the place. Not long after, Miss Perry's low tide decided to sluice all across Ruby Rose's nostrils. So there you go. Mr. Trudeau is dating a squid. And then once Miss Perry decides to remove her vaginal lips, a giant sucking sound emerged. And Ruby Rose's nostrils and sinuses were cleared. And not unlike a remora being ripped off the belly of a shark, Miss Ruby Rose decides to run away from Miss Perry at this sexual assault and throw up everything inside of her. So we shall see more of this. Miss Perry has not responded, but I do look forward to hearing how she is going to get out of this one. I mean, think about this, Miss Katy Perry. Oh, a Pop Tart at large. Meanwhile, she's rubbing her cabbage cookie all over somebody's poor face. Ugh, and then worst of all, it is not unlike low tide during a hot summer's day to make this poor girl lose everything inside of her. Just disgusting. Just disgusting. Equally as disgusting as Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, the man can not pass up a sheet cake, never the one to miss happy hour. Mr. Pritzker also probably enjoys a 72-ounce steak nightly. He decided to sign House Bill 106. What does this do, you might ask? The Illinois governor signs this law, and what does it do? Decriminalizes spreading HIV. And now the new policy officially repeals a law that started back in 1986. Pritzker eliminated the HIV-specific criminal statute, according to Wall Street Apes, that made it a felony for someone who knew that they had HIV to engage in activities like unprotected sex, sharing needles, and donating blood without disclosure. So now, if you're in Illinois and you need blood for whatever reason, there is a significant chance that you could be getting HIV-tainted blood because there will be no repercussions. Now, I tend to go down the darker roads with all of this. You know, I look at things with a jaundiced eye because I've been reviewing and studying current events for as long as I can remember. Why would they want to decriminalize spreading HIV? Also, factor in that Mr. Pritzker is running a Democrat state, right? Chicago and all that. Could be illegal immigration. Could be that, right? I could buy that. You have a lot of illegal immigrants that maybe they need to have sex. Maybe they want to share needles. Or maybe they would like to donate blood because they're feeling altruistic. But I would probably venture a guess in this direction, being that Mr. Pritzker is running Illinois, the Democrat state. The mRNA injections, the gene therapy prophylactics, probably was implemented into the population by high percentages. Let's just leave it at that. A lot of people probably took those injections. I wonder if people took those injections, could they test positive for HIV more often than not? Because if that were the case, then that allows us to say, okay, the population at large, they're going to donate blood, they're going to have sex, and they very well may be testing positive for HIV. And let's say you have somebody that has accepted blood or has had relations like Miss Perry and Miss Rose had, and suddenly Miss Rose tests positive for HIV. I wonder. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. As usual, I engage in the prodding of mainstream narratives. Always beware, because think about this too. They were allowing all kinds of people to take this stuff, and the studies for the trials focused on this exact kind of activity, sexual activity. So that's my 2 cents on that one. You never know where that could lead. And it's unfortunate that we are at this precipice here, because guess what? Donald Trump does not seem to be interested in learning about what actually happened to those that potentially got harmed. Dr. Kelly Victory was giving a interview to Shannon Joy. You can follow both of them wherever you go. But Miss Joy revealed that she was speaking to Senator Ron Johnson. And he told Miss Joy that President Trump had almost zero interest in learning about what happened to those people that suffered injuries after being injected. In fact, Donald Trump viewed Operation Warp Speed as the glittering jewel of his first administration, which means what? Which means that Donald Trump does not want to hear anything negative, especially if it is some kind of impact to his voter base. So, what does this tell us? It tells us that these effects are still going on, and we are still in the dark about how severe these adverse events could potentially be, especially since the testing for these shots go out until at least 2027. But that's neither here nor there. Over in Oregon, Initiative Petition 28, the Peace Act, is going to do something that I have warned against. And that is engaging in dystopian societies here in the United States. They can't do it at the federal level, there'll be too much backlash. But they will engage in utter control mechanisms at the state level. And so, Petition 28, the Peace Act, is saying that if you dare to hunt or fish for food on your property, or if you raise and slaughter animals like chickens and pigs and cows for meat on your own land or farm, you will be breaking the law. It will be illegal for you to grow your own food, to fish for your own game, and so on. This is one more way that these states are going to force people to rely completely on the government for every single thing that you need for your existence. And I would also think that they're going to try to push universal basic income into the mix over the next couple of years. Maybe not under Donald Trump, but once AI starts to take over the workplace even further, then you will not have as much of a need for actual human workers any longer. So you need something for these people to do, at least to sustain themselves. So that's where UBI comes into play. And if UBI comes into play, that means that you will only be able to get your digital coupons, right? Because we have to assume at this point there will be only digital currencies. That if you do not abide by the government narrative, if you do not have a positive social credit score, if you do not take the mandated injections or medications, then guess what? You will not be able to leave the vicinity of your registered address and so on. You will only be able to buy food, lab grown food, from the government or government approved agencies and so on. So there you go, Oregon. Congrats. I hope the eastern portions of your state somehow meld with another state, possibly Idaho, right? Maybe we can get Idaho to be a little bit bigger. We know that they're trying to do that in Washington and so on, but I hope that happens sooner than later. And this one, Chandler, Arizona. Now, Chandler, I don't know if you've ever been to Arizona, but Chandler, Arizona, the big claim to fame, I believe, is a water tower. And they've got a little nice downtown. So there was a protest going on over there at the Hamilton High School, and it was against ICE. Not surprising, coming from Chandler. Somebody in the protests wearing a hat, wearing a mask, right? You can only see the beady eyes of the thief. He is inserting himself into those protests and trying to rabble rouse. What do I mean by this? He is an agent provocateur. Turns out that Sergeant Dustin Mullen of the police force decided to try and push people into altercations so that he could subsequently call the police department, and the police department could then move in to arrest all of the protesters. And he was, quote unquote, trying to get students to assault me so that they could then arrest them all. By the way, Mr. Mullen, including overtime, makes somewhere around 300 grand a year. He's been placed on administrative leave by the Phoenix Police Department. He's one of the top 10 earners in Phoenix as well. But even if he is at home, he is still making at least $250,000 per year. So I don't want to hear anybody that says things like, oh, the No Kings protests, it's all a grassroots thing. People, they're coming up from their homes and they are protesting the kings and the oligarchy and the patriarchy and ICE. We won't touch anything that the United States and Israel would do to Iran. We cannot say anything negative about that. But immigration, that is our bread and butter. And it's all thanks to retirees going out there. No. Or the biggest one, January 6th, right? You mean to tell me that it is impossible to believe that January 6th could have had agent provocateurs inserted into the rabble rally? You mean it might not have been a grassroots Trump supporting movement that wandered around the Capitol? These people weren't trying to overthrow the government. They couldn't, even if they tried to on their best day. But it gave flack for the Democrats to run rampant over the United States and what they did to Donald Trump and how they just ground this whole Russiagate narrative. Donald Trump is a fascist nonsense into the dirt. So, oh, yes, by the way, Bilderberg, the hyper elites, they try to figure out what they want to do and instill upon us over the next year. They do this every single year. They decided to hold their meeting a month early, which is a bit surprising. Why would they do this? And apparently it was under duress. So it could have been an emergency meeting. There was an unfortunate looking woman exiting the Bilderberg group. She is the epitome of lantern jawed. She is Blaise Matrelli. She's the current head of British intelligence over at MI6. She was leaving the Bilderberg Group in Washington, D.C. What else do we know about her? Is that she is the granddaughter of someone by the name of Konstantin Dobrowolski. Couldn't say that before on the other podcast, but Dobrowolski. He was known as the Butcher. Why was he known as the Butcher? Because he was a Ukrainian Nazi during World War II, where he was brutalizing civilians in the Ukraine in villages alongside Hitler's troops. So let's get that out of the way. He was also a Nazi collaborator beyond being a butcher, working with police units of 300 criminals, raped women, beheaded people, tortured partisans. And then once after that, he went over into England, part of the MI6. So his granddaughter is following in his footsteps by now leading the MI6. I mean, we're seriously still under Nazi influence all the way 100 years or almost 100 years later. I mean, it's just ridiculous at this point that we even have to endure this kind of slop. Couldn't there be a better narrative at this point? I mean, I hate zombies, but I would take zombies over Nazis at this point, simply because we cannot endure these kinds of morons any longer. And the front lines of the world and the Third World War and so on, it's being drawn, okay? It's being drawn. You're starting to see it start around the Gulf states, move up through Israel, move up, and then it kind of stops with Turkey. And then it goes even further north with the border of the Ukraine, and then you've got the Baltic states versus Belarus and Russia, right? And then you're going to involve North Korea, China, and so on. Those are essentially the front line, if you can imagine that. But there's something further along than this. It's not just Iran, it's not just the Ukraine, but it also has the prize for Donald Trump, and that is to make sure that China is not a competitor in any form to the United States. If there's going to be a multipolar world, China will not be a part of it if Trump has his way. So, what do we see? We saw Venezuela get knocked out. We saw Iran get knocked down a few pegs. Not completely knocked out, even though I do suspect there is a coup that is going on in Iran. And subsequently, they've lost the initiative while Donald Trump streams in supplies to the Middle East on a minute-by-minute basis. I do believe that Iran has lost the initiative overall. But what do we see further? China, right? China was getting its energy from Venezuela. China was getting its energy, a substantial amount, I think upwards of 20%, from Iran. Iran has effectively controlled the Straits of Hormuz. It hasn't shut it down, except if you're Israeli or American, or you're some kind of company that is trying to do something for the Israelis or the Americans. But China is now in the lurch. China has decided to say, well, if we're going to play this kind of game, then we need to take matters into our own hands. Chinese Premier Li Qiang signed a decree of the State Council that basically says we're not playing around. If you interfere in our international affairs, saying that actions taken by a foreign country, such as, oh, I don't know, Israel or the United States, that violate international law and the basic norms governing international relations and that harm China's sovereignty, security, and development interests, or the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens and organizations, the Chinese government has the authority to take countermeasures in response to such actions to exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction over relevant conduct if a sufficient nexus exists. What does this mean? It means FAFO. It means F around and find out. And we learned that China is sending over its missile destroyers, so a type of naval ship festooned with missiles, over into the direction of the Middle East. Because if the United States is going to try to blockade any ships that are Iranian or any ships that are meant to help Iran in any way out of the Straits of Hormuz, the Chinese are going to have something to say about it. And the United States will have to answer. The Chinese, I do not believe, are playing around because they understand how the game works. The United States also engaged in a new understanding in the Strait of Malacca. This is something that's been going around. It's called the Malacca Dilemma. Essentially, China gets its energy through a number of straits in the Southwest Pacific. So you're talking about the Philippines, Indonesia, and all the rest. And these straits are exactly what you think they are. They are narrow choke points, and China needs to traverse those choke points in order to get its oil and energy and other products. So the United States has now engaged with a major defense cooperation partnership with Indonesia. And the usual diplomatic euphemisms apply: capacity building, maritime security, and joint training. You know what this means? It means the United States is trying to strangle China because the United States, along with its vassal, Indonesia, is now going to play the same game that Iran plays in the Straits of Hormuz. They're going to try eventually, maybe not now, but eventually, to tax ships, to implement duties, to search ships, to control the straits. It's not just the Strait of Malacca that China has to worry about. It's also the Mindoro Strait, the Makassar Strait, the Lombok Strait. They're all across Malaysia and Indonesia. China is potentially looking at the United States strangling its energy supplies. And there are land barriers to China itself. You've got things like Mongolia and Nepal, and also, I wish I could say this properly, Kyrgyzstan. Which, by the way, Kyrgyzstan, if I can say that correctly, I don't know how to say that. They're doing away with any Russian named city, state, and road. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Western influence is alive and well in Central Asia. So China is the main target of Donald Trump, and it's also going to be Iran, because we all know that Donald Trump's major donors are all hyper vigilant when it comes to Israeli sympathies. So this is what we're actually looking at, and it is really, really sad that we're at this point. It's really disturbing that we're trying to pick a fight with China. And Europeans, even though they are extremely haughty, are starting to see the game as well. Spain's prime minister went to China and said international law is being violated fundamentally by one country, the government of Israel. It's very hard to find anyone but China who can untangle this. So I don't know if Spain should be the one that talks, because Spain was ruled by a guy by the name of Franco for a very long time, thanks to the Nazis during the Spanish Civil War that assisted him. And Franco also allowed the Nazis after World War II and towards the end of it to stream through his country to make it to various other locales in South America and also Southeast Asia and Southwest Asia. So I don't know how many legs Spain gets to stand on. And also, Spain is engaging in an amnesty style policy. So all of the illegal immigrants that went over to Spain are now suddenly Spanish citizens. So I don't know how much, we can take them seriously. However, Spain, as well as Italy, I don't know. It almost seems like a new axis, right? Spain and Italy have stopped allowing the United States and Israel to use its airspace to transport supplies and all that, too. So maybe the Europeans are going to do something positive, but I do believe they're trying to shovel off the responsibility to China because the Europeans really do not have a leg to stand on when it comes to production and industry. I think they're a little bit too late when it comes to all of this because they've relied on the United States for such a long time. And now I suspect they're going to lean on China to not only defend them, possibly get into new NATO style agreements, maybe not tomorrow, but in the next 5 to 10 years. And you will see this sudden counterbalance, which also explains kind of why Trump is threatening to leave NATO. If you're going to get cozy with China, then you're not going to get cozy with the United States. We're no longer going to foot the bill. This also allows what? It allows the next phase of the Middle East to take place. The Russian Security Council said the USA and Israel could use peace talks to prepare for a ground operation against Iran, and the Pentagon continues to generate troops in the region. There are more than 50,000 American soldiers already concentrated in the Middle East. So yes, it's the typical debate and switch. They try to engage in some kind of negotiation. They try to say, oh, we need to stop this kind of nuclear development. Oh, my goodness, we can't have a nuclear Iran, even though they're a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And we can't bear to stand it. After Iran, it's already being made public, especially from morons like Laura Loomer, just an insufferable old bag, that Turkey is next in the crosshairs. Once they get rid of Iran, once they settle all of this kind of nonsense, Turkey is on the hit list. How dare Turkey be involved in NATO? How dare Turkey is going to even consider to support and train organizations like ISIS and allow Hamas terrorists to be supported by the Turkish military, and on we go with this hyperbolic claptrap. Let's be honest here. Laura Loomer is not bringing the potato salad to the Mensa picnic anytime soon. If she had done any bit of homework, or she would actually be honest for once, we would also find out that ISIS and Hamas was being funded by the West, being funded by the United States, Israel, NATO, and you can find many a news story from the mainstream media outlet about how ISIS was given supplies, was given respite, was giving medical treatment from Israel itself. Remember, ISIS suddenly flourished when Hillary Clinton was the head of the State Department. ISIS suddenly went dark as soon as Trump 1.0 came into office. Why? Because Trump decided to stop funding ISIS. That's why. As soon as Biden stepped into office, what happened? Oh, there's a resurgence of ISIS. It's a Western-backed militant organization. And by the way, a radical Muslim organization. I've never seen a radical Muslim organization only ever go after other Muslims. So please stop the nonsense. And so here we are, Laura Loomer the other day saying, time for Turkey to be kicked out of NATO. Erdogan is threatening to attack Israel. This threat happened 2 years ago, back in 2024. So this is not major news. This is not breaking. But Laura Loomer and Mark Levin, they're trying to make hay out of this 2-year-old headline because they know that the Netanyahu government has their sights on Turkey after they settle the score with Iran. That's going to be it for me. It's the Chris Michaels Show. I'll be back. You can follow me at C. Michaels Show on X, where I am shadow banned into oblivion. Or you can go over to Spotify, The Chris Michaels Show. That's where all the action happens. I do 4 to 5 podcasts, interviews, and I regale you with brilliant topics and cutting-edge commentary. I appreciate all the shares, likes, and follows. I will be back tomorrow with more glittering jewels of brilliance.